Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel and we're focused on the latest theory of everything that nobody knows anything about. And today is video 253 on the reciprocal system of theory. And this is a theory of everything that was introduced by Dewey B. Larson back in the 20th century, and he passed away back in 1990, but not before writing many books on the subject, and starting with his fundamental postulates, and then from those postulates he deduced a theoretical universe, and applied his system of theory to subjects like chemistry, astronomy, physics, but also economics and metaphysics. And his small group of followers also have made various contributions. Among them, very large among them, was Dr. Bruce Perret. And Dr. Perret also passed away back in 2020, but he left behind a lot of great work, and he spread Larson's theory to many other subjects. He also did some revision of got some of the kinks out of Larson's work, and was maybe a little bit controversial for that, because some of the followers of Larson were far more orthodox in their orientation, and I tend to be, more leaning toward Perret's more revisionist bent. As Larson would have said, or did say, the theory itself is correct. Whether I have applied the theory correctly or not is a different question, and I could have made some mistakes in my application that's in his deduction from the original postulates. There are two original postulates. Perret actually takes issue with one of them, but that is by far the minor one, that just talks about kind of the rules. The universe follows the rules of ordinary commutative mathematics. Its magnitudes are absolute and its geometry is Euclidean. That is Euclidean geometry to Perret was somewhat of a limiting factor to Larson's postulate, and he replaced that with projective geometry, which is a more expansive, more inclusive geometry, of which Euclidean geometry is just a subset. There's really like a geometrical cascade that starts with Euclidean geometry, but then goes to metric geometry, and then affine geometry, and then ultimately projective geometry. So projective geometry is more of an umbrella that Euclidean geometry fits within. Now the first postulate is the major postulate for Larson, and that is that the universe is, this is not quoting but paraphrasing, the universe is made entirely of motion. And motion for Larson was the relationship between space and time. Space and time is basically a fraction that has time or space as the numerator and space or time as the denominator, and all sorts of different kinds of motion or scientific quantities fill this bill. So, for example, Energy is simply time divided by space. Matter is time to the third power divided by space to the third power, which Larson makes room for as he, in his postulate, says that both space and time have their coordinate aspects, meaning that they come in three or possibly more dimensions. We generally recognize three dimensions of space, not so much three dimensions of time. But since time and space are reciprocals of one another, they both have the same qualities. And a second quality of space and time is that they have their clock aspects, which is something that we recognize more with time than with space. Time is flowing or progressing. Time is always getting later and later in our experience. But space also has that clock quantity or clock quality that space is always getting farther and farther apart. And this was actually discovered or observed by the Hubble telescope, I guess, back in the 1920s. All of the distant galaxies were seen to be moving away from each other. That is the progression of space. And then time and space also only come in discrete units. There is a minimum unit of time and a minimum unit of space. The whole universe is made out of space-time or motion, and so everything is made out of space or time. And if it's not made out of space, then it has to be made out of time, and vice versa. So if you have less than 1 unit of space, you only have time. And if you have less than 1 unit of time, you only have space. So by the discrete unit postulate, if you have less than 1 unit of space or time, then you only have the other. And so that creates a boundary, unit boundary, 1 unit of space or 1 unit of time, less than that, and then you only have the other. And so that sets up 2 boundaries within the universe. But the major boundary that divides the universe into 2 sectors is the unit speed boundary. That's what you get when you have 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time. 1 over 1 equals 1. The unit speed is the speed of light. And the speed of light is the dividing line or the midpoint, the boundary between what Larson calls the material sector and the cosmic sector. And in the material sector, that is everything that's moving slower than the speed of light. And that includes what Larson calls the time region, everything that's within 1 unit of space. But then on the other side of the boundary, you have the cosmic sector, which is everything that's moving faster than the speed of light. And within that sector, you also have what Larson calls the space region, which is everything that is within 1 unit of time. So that sets up, 4 different regions of the universe that are divided by 3 different boundaries. And that's, kind of where he started and then began to deduce his theoretical universe. Now, today we're looking at, this is about the 29th video, I think, on some of the work of Dr. Bruce Perret. And Dr. Perret wrote under the pen name of Daniel Phoenix 3 for some of his work, his more speculative work. And we are looking at the third volume, the third installment of his anthropology series on the hidden history of Homo sapiens. And this particular article, I can never remember the name of, but it's called Homo sapiens ethicus, life, death, reincarnation, and ascension. And we have been reading this article for 5 or 6, maybe 7 days, and so we're well into it. But so if you want to start from the top, you are going to want to go back about six days worth of videos. But we're going to take over here with the section called the conjugate realms, the world and the other world, or it's actually this world and the other world. One of the more spectacular conclusions that Dewey Larson made with his reciprocal relation between space and time was the discovery of a sector of the universe that is the conjugate of the one we are familiar with, literally the universe of time, which he termed the cosmic sector. The cosmic half of the universe contains structures similar to what we observe in the material, spatial half. Atoms, dust, rock, asteroids, planets, suns, galaxies, everything that can exist here in three-dimensional space can have an analog in three-dimensional time. These two halves of the universe are not separate phenomena. The close coupling of these sectors can easily be identified by the difference between structure and force fields. Structure is spatial. We can observe it, we can measure it, and we can manipulate it. However, force fields are temporal, unobserved except by the effect they have on structure. A simple way to represent the interaction of these two halves of the universe is through the concept of the complex quantity, where the real component is space and the imaginary component is time. Just to refresh your memory, if you haven't taken math since high school, he's talking about imaginary numbers. You may remember the imaginary number being I, and that is the square root of -1, which is imaginary. But a complex number is a mixture of a real number and an imaginary number. So a complex number is like 2 plus 3i. So it's a mixture of a real number and an imaginary number, even though they are incommensurable. Okay, so we'll go back to the beginning of the sentence. A simple way to represent the interaction of these two halves of the universe is through the concept of the complex quantity, where the real component is space and the imaginary component is time. So if you have 2 plus 3i, that means that 2 is the spatial real component and 3i is the imaginary temporal component. Note that this is the same is the case from the material perspective. From the cosmic or antimatter or afterlife perspective, the situation is reversed, and time is real and three-dimensional, and space is imaginary, and I would guess progressing. Perfect complements of each other. In the ancient mythologies and parables, this world refers to the three-dimensional spatial realm of observed structures, being ordered by clock time and invisibly influenced by the other world. The properties and characteristics of this other world closely match the natural consequences of a realm of Larson's cosmic sector. Reported journeys into the other world equate distance and duration. Should a visitor to the other world fail to exit it from precisely the same point they entered upon returning, they would be displaced in clock time, arriving before birth or years after death. This is the concept of clock space, where distance in the other world equates to duration in this world. The world is identified as the land of the living, entered by birth and exited by death, but only comprising half of the cycle. The other world comprises the other half of the cycle, the afterlife, as it is often called, entered by death and exited by birth. There are those in this world who do not believe in life after death, and usually the same folks, after transitioning to the other world, do not believe in life before death. This usually indicates that they haven't been around the loop very many times. Okay, this section is called the transition zone. As mentioned earlier, if an organism has not acquired sufficient amount of chi upon the dissolution of life units while dying, both halves of the organism can return to inanimate status, the dust from which you were created. This is a true death, in the sense that nothing of the pattern of memory or spirit of the organism is able to be carried forward. It is not a waste, however, as the atoms released in both the material and cosmic sectors will eventually be reused in another living organism. The universe is recycle friendly. However, when there is sufficient chi to retain the pattern of identity, the organism enters the transition zone and enters the reincarnative or ascension process. The transitional zone starts with reincarnation or ascension blocks on the chart and ends with either rebirth, meaning re-entering the conjugate sector through birth, or ascension to the immortal realms. Note that the transition zone is not the cosmic otherworld. The basic nature of the otherworld is indistinguishable from this world to the newborn consciousness. You believe you have been reincarnated into the same world you left, but have actually transitioned to the conjugate aspect. Upon death in that world, you will again enter the transition zone and return to the land of the living. Though in both cases, living and afterlife are relative terms. Okay, this section is called the immortal realms. The term immortal means not subject to death or everlasting. In the context of the ascended being, this is indeed true, as they have moved beyond the necessity of the reincarnative cycle, as well as the concepts of clock time and clock space. It is just another stage of existence that is a natural consequence of the evolution of consciousness, and does not infer special power or ability, as those concepts are mortal ones, not immortal ones. All right, a subsection here called the realm of flame, the density of honor. The fifth density mentioned in the law of one is the density of honor, more appropriately called duty, honor, and responsibility. It is the first of the immortal realms, where systems are brought into balance through the concept of rapport. Though the system is in balance, it is more like a juggling act than perfect symmetry. The net bioenergy of the organism has reached peace, but it is far from symmetric or crystalline. Honor has aspects of duty and responsibility, which play an important role in the realm of flame, because the primary energy of the realm is Shen, the animus, intellectual or spiritual bioenergy. The activities here are primarily mental ones, and this is also known as the mental plane of existence, where one has a duty to continue the evolution of consciousness along with a responsibility not to interact with the mortal realms. Newly ascended entities are very tempted to interact with the mortal realms because of the displacements in space and time they carry to hold their balance. But if they do, then that displacement is offset and they literally fall back into the mortal realm, having not learned their lesson. Evolution in the realm of flame is achieved by burning off the remains of the material and cosmic values, those of self-centeredness, excess charity, service to self, and service to others. When the chaff of mortality is cast off, the system becomes more symmetric, and the transition to the density of unity begins, and consciousness enters the realm of light. Okay. It's hard for me to see how far we are into this. Let's start this next section here, and it's a mini section or subsection till we get to the next major one. This is called Densities of Unity and Timelessness, the Realms of Light and Creativity. Information from human sources is scarce on these immortal levels of existence, but can be inferred through the extension of Larson's process of elimination, by removing what we can attribute to the other densities and realms and taking a look at what is left over. Unfortunately, it does not leave much other than to indicate that there are two additional levels that have been achieved by conscious, intelligent beings. Hard to call them human at this stage of development. The density of unity and the realm of light is the stage at which consciousness takes on a new role based in rapport and has the ability to be a creator, perhaps better termed evolver. It is not about genetically engineering new races or zapping new worlds in or out of existence, but concerns an investigation into the evolution of consciousness itself. Once this investigation has reached some conclusions, the density of timelessness and the realm of creativity become the next step, where these conclusions can be put into action. The research of George Hunter Williamson on the Cyclopeans and the group he terms the Elder Race provides additional details. Using the corrected geochronology developed in part 1. The first visitors to this planet were the Cyclopeans during the Paleozoic era, and their presence may have well been responsible for the Cambrian explosion of life documented in the fossil record. Williamson's premise was that these visitors were a spiritually advanced race seeking the next stage of evolution of consciousness and were looking for an out-of-the-way place to take the final stages of this more advanced form of ascension. Not a movement to a higher density, but a transition to the next octave of existence. Our solar system, being on the leading edge of the Sagittarius dwarf galaxy, being pulled into the Milky Way, was at the leading edge of the solar system evolution and therefore made a good so-called monastery for the completion of this research. The Cyclopeans did not directly interfere with the development of life, as did the Titans and their Anunnaki progeny. But the presence of a field of consciousness that intense would undoubtedly accelerate the development of biological diversity in the local environment. So our solar system is a special place, being both on the leading edge of solar system formation and having a collective boost to the life energy of the world. Okay, and so the next section that we will begin tomorrow is called the psychology of souls. Meanwhile, I hope you have a great day. Thanks for tuning in.